Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is ANESSA HANIM and I will be representative for Group 3. In this video, I'll be explaining about DHCP. DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. Every computer or device on a network has to have an IP address for communication purposes. An IP address is an identifier for a computer or device on a network. DHCP goals is to assign unique IP addresses to our host. It also provides other network addresses such as the subnet mask, default gateway, and the DNS address. It comes in two flavors, as a client and a server. And there are two ways that a computer can be assigned an IP address. They could be done by using a static IP or a dynamic IP. Now, a static IP is where a user assigns a computer or device with an IP address manually. This was the original method that was done in the beginning of networking. For each computer on a network, you had to open up the computer's network configuration page and manually type in. But in addition to an IP address, you also have to type in a subnet mask, default gateway, and a DNS server. And anytime that you wanted to add another computer or device to the network, you had to do the same thing. This could be a lot of work, especially dealing with a large network that has a lot of computers. And you also have to make sure that all the IP addresses are unique, because if you assign the same IP address twice, it will cause an IP conflict and will cause those computers to not have access to the network. But there is a better and easier way to assign a computer for an IP address, and this is called a dynamic IP. A DHCP server automatically assigns a computer with an IP address, subnet mask, default gateway, and DNS server. Here we have a network connection properties window open for the network interface card on a Microsoft Windows computer. And as you can see here, this computer is set to obtain an IP address automatically. Now, how does DHCP work? DHCP will use DORA process to provide the IP address to the client's or host machine. When you switch on the PC with no IP address, it will look for a DHCP server. It just shout out to everyone, hoping somewhere on the network is a DHCP server. This is broadcast message. All of the other devices get this message, look it, and drop it. This step called DHCP Discover. Step 2. DHCP Offer. When the DHCP server gets the message, the server will offer the IP address to the host. It then sends the offer to host. If more than one offer, the host will choose the first one. Step 3. DHCP Request. The host will take the offer and sends the request to the DHCP server. Step 4. DHCP Acknowledgement. The DHCP sends the IP address to the host along with the subnet mask, default gateway, and DNS server. The DHCP server keeps a record of all the leased IP addresses and their lease time. Once that's done, you can verify all the different settings that the DHCP server has given to our computer. This can be done by opening up a command prompt on Windows computer and then type in ipconfig \all, then press enter. You can see here the DHCP is enabled on this computer, which means that it's getting its IP address from a DHCP server. You can see the IP address here along with the subnet mask, default gateway, and DNS server. All of these settings were given by the DHCP server. So, as you can tell, dynamic IP addressing is the best choice because it's automatic and it makes managing a network a lot easier. Now, when computers obtain an IP address from a DHCP server, the server assigns the IP address as a lease. So the computer doesn't actually own the IP address, it's actually a lease. A lease is the amount of time an IP address is assigned to a computer. For example, the lease could be for 1 day. The reason for the lease is to help make sure that the DHCP server does not run out IP addresses in its scope. One final thing to note about DHCP is that DHCP is a service that runs on a server. For example, this could be a Microsoft server or a Linux server. But it's also a service that runs on many routers also. Whether the router is a business router or a small office or home office router, these routers will have a DHCP service built into them. For all the useful functions DHCP offers, there are some downsides to utilizing this system. DHCP automation can be a serious security risk if a rogue DHCP server is introduced to the network. A rogue server isn't under control of the network staff and can offer IP addresses to users connecting to the network. If a user connects to the rogue DHCP, information sent over that connection can be intercepted or looked at, violating user privacy and network security. This can lead to serious consequences if confidential information is sent over to the rogue DHCP server. Another issue is if only one DHCP server is provided from a single critical junction where failures can impact system-wide problems. If the server fails, any connected computer will fail to get the IP address. All network access will be lost until the server is restored. DHCP is a network protocol that enables a server to automatically assign an IP address to the computer. It is from a defined range of numbers configured for a given network. Thank you for listening.